Picture this: a quiet evening, the kind where the air hums with the faint buzz of crickets outside my window, and I'm sitting alone in our little living room, a cup of chamomile tea cooling in my hands. My name is Carmen, and at 35, I've carved out a life that feels like a well-worn sweater, comfortable, familiar, maybe a little frayed at the edges. I've been married to Dylan for 6 years now, and if I had to describe our marriage in a single word, it'd be steady. Not the kind of steady that's boring, mind you, but the kind that wraps around you like a warm blanket on a chilly night. We've got our routines: coffee together in the morning, quiet dinners after long days, and the occasional movie night where we fall asleep halfway through. Dylan's the kind of man who makes you feel safe, with his calm demeanor and that gentle smile that always seems to know more than he lets on. He's rooted deep in his family, tied to them in a way I've never quite been to anyone. Growing up, I was more of a lone wolf, bouncing between houses and cities, never staying long enough to plant roots of my own. So when I met Dylan, and by extension his family, it was like stepping into a world I'd only ever seen in old photographs or sappy holiday movies. Dylan's family is a force of nature, vibrant, chaotic, and so full of warmth that it's almost suffocating at times. From the moment they met me, they pulled me in with open arms, no questions asked. I remember the first time I walked into their old creaky house on the edge of our small suburban town, a place where everyone knows your name and your business before you've even had a chance to unpack. That house, with its sagging porch and mismatched furniture, is the heart of everything for them. Linda and Robert, Dylan's parents, are the glue that holds it all together. Linda's always in the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour, barking orders with a smile, while Robert's in his armchair, telling the same stories about his fishing trips that we've all heard 100 times. They host dinners, barbecues, birthdays, any excuse to get everyone under one roof. And everyone means everyone, including Dylan's 2 younger brothers, Miles and Grant. Those 2 are always around, part of every gathering, their laughter filling up the spaces between conversations. They're good guys, don't get me wrong, but there's something about the way they look at me sometimes, lingering glances that I've noticed over the years, that sets me on edge. It's nothing I can put my finger on, just a feeling, like a shadow passing over the sun for a split second before it's gone. Living in this town, where family ties are everything, has been an adjustment for someone like me. I've never had a big clan to call my own, never had that built-in network of people who, as I sit here thinking back on that evening, I can still feel the hum of anticipation that buzzed through me as Dylan and I piled into the car for the short drive to Linda and Robert's house. The sun was dipping low, casting a golden glow over the tree-lined streets we've driven down 100 times before. I leaned my head against the window, watching the familiar blur of neat lawns and picket fences slip by, while Dylan tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, humming along to some old rock tune crackling through the radio. He was completely at ease, like he always is when we're headed to his childhood home, a place that holds so many of his memories. I envied that a little, his ability to sink into the comfort of it all without a second thought. For me, every visit still feels like stepping onto a stage, playing a part I'm not quite sure I've mastered yet. We pulled up to the house just as the last light of day painted the sky in streaks of pink and orange. That old place stood there like it always does, with its sagging porch and peeling paint, a testament to years of love and chaos. The windows were thrown open, and the smell of roasted chicken hit me before I even stepped out of the car, mingling with the faint scent of freshly cut grass from the neighbor's yard. I could hear the muffled sounds of life spilling out, Linda's voice calling out something I couldn't quite catch, and the deep rumble of Robert's laughter cutting through the evening air. It was the kind of scene that could have been pulled straight from a painting, warm and inviting. Yet I felt that familiar knot in my stomach as I grabbed the bottle of wine we'd brought and followed Dylan up the creaky steps. Inside, the house was a whirlwind of noise and motion. Linda was in the kitchen, as always, her hands busy with a wooden spoon as she shouted over her shoulder for someone to grab the rolls from the oven. She spotted me right away, her face breaking into a wide grin, and before I could say a word, she'd pulled me into one of her signature hugs, tight and warm, smelling of rosemary and a hint of her floral perfume. I couldn't help but smile as she fussed over me, asking if I'd eaten enough that day, like I was one of her own kids. Over by the couch, Robert was nursing a glass of whiskey, his eyes crinkling with amusement as he teased Dylan about some embarrassing story from when they were kids. Something about a treehouse and a broken ladder that had Dylan rolling his eyes, but laughing all the same. In the living room, Miles and Grant were roughhousing, their playful shoves and loud banter echoing off the walls as they dodged around the furniture. They caught sight of me and flashed those sly smiles of theirs, the kind that always seemed to carry a little too much weight, before they roped me into helping set the big wooden dining table in the center of the room. As we worked, I caught small moments. The laughter and chatter of dinner had finally died down, leaving behind an eerie silence in the kitchen that felt heavier than it should have. I stood at the sink, the warm water running over my hands as I scrubbed the last of the plates, the clatter of ceramic against ceramic, the only sound breaking the stillness. Upstairs, I could hear the faint murmur of Dylan and Robert talking, their voices a distant hum that seemed worlds away from where I was. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, like the house itself was holding its breath. I tried to focus on the task at hand, on the mundane rhythm of washing and rinsing, but there was a tension creeping up my spine, a feeling I couldn't shake. Then I sensed it. Someone behind me. I didn't turn at first, didn't want to acknowledge the shift in the air, but I knew it was Miles before I even felt the warmth of his breath on the back of my neck. My hands stilled in the soapy water, suds dripping off my fingers as he stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat radiating from him. My breath caught in my throat, a mix of unease and something darker stirring in my chest. Before I could say anything, before I could even think, his hand brushed against my thigh. A slow, deliberate touch that sent a jolt through me, sharp and electric. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up as my mind scrambled to process what was happening. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misstep. This was intentional, and the weight of that realization made my heart pound so hard I thought it might burst. I turned my head just enough to see Grant out of the corner of my eye, moving silently across the kitchen. He positioned himself in front of me, blocking the doorway with his broad frame, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach twist. His eyes were dark, unreadable, but there was something in them I'd never seen before, a hunger, a challenge. I felt trapped, caught between the two of them, the sink at my back and nowhere to go. My hands were still in the water, gripping the edge of a plate like it was a lifeline, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Then Grant leaned in, his voice low, a whisper that cut through the silence like a blade. "Your husband won't see if you're quiet." Those words hit me like a punch, stealing the air from my lungs. My mind reeled, spinning out of control as I tried to make sense of what he was saying, what they were doing. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not in this house, not with Dylan just upstairs. But there was a part of me, a small, dangerous part, that felt a pull, a dark, inexplicable draw to the forbidden edge they were pushing me toward. I hated that part of myself in that moment, hated how it made my pulse race even faster, how it made me hesitate when I should have pushed Miles away, when I should have screamed. I didn't push him away. I didn't scream. Instead, I stood there, paralyzed, as Miles's hand lingered on my thigh, his touch firm now, no longer a question, but a claim. Grant's hand found my waist, his fingers pressing into my skin through the thin fabric of my shirt, pulling me slightly toward him. My breath hitched, my body betraying me as a wave of heat surged through me, drowning out the voice in my head that was begging me to stop. It was like I was watching myself from outside my body, unable to intervene as the moment spiraled out of control. The kitchen. This place where we'd shared so many family meals, so many laughs, became something else entirely. A stage for a betrayal I never saw coming. In a blur of confusion and raw, reckless desire, I gave in. I let them guide me away from the sink, the water still running behind us, forgotten. The old kitchen table, scarred from years of use, became the center of it all. My back pressed against the worn wood as Miles's hands roamed, as Grant's breath mingled with mine, the world narrowing to nothing but the heat and the rush of what we were doing. My heart was still hammering in my chest, a wild, frantic rhythm that wouldn't slow down, as the reality of what I'd just done started to sink in. The kitchen felt like it was closing in around me, the air heavy with the scent of dish soap and the lingering heat of forbidden touch. I could barely think straight, my mind a chaotic mess of guilt and adrenaline, when I heard it. Dylan's voice, clear and familiar, calling out from the hallway. "Carmen, you still down there?" It was casual, unsuspecting, the kind of tone he always used when he was just checking in, but it hit me like a bucket of ice water, snapping me back to a reality I wasn't ready to face. My stomach dropped, a sickening lurch that made me feel like I might collapse right there on the spot. Miles and Grant reacted instantly, pulling away from me as if I'd suddenly burned them. Their faces were a storm of emotions, fear, defiance, a flicker of something like regret, though I couldn't be sure. Miles ran a hand through his hair, stepping back toward the counter, his jaw tight, while Grant turned his head away, his broad shoulders tense as he moved to the other side of the table. I was left standing there, caught in the middle, my breath ragged and my body still trembling from the intensity of what had just happened. My hands shook as I fumbled to adjust my clothes, smoothing down my shirt with clumsy, desperate movements. I could feel the heat in my cheeks, the flush of shame burning across my skin, and I knew there was no way to hide it. The guilt was written all over me. A scarlet letter I couldn't erase no matter how hard I tried to compose myself. I wiped my palms on my jeans, trying to steady my breathing, but every inhale felt like it was dragging glass into my lungs. I barely had a moment to pull myself together before I heard the soft thud of footsteps approaching. My eyes darted to the doorway, my pulse skyrocketing as Dylan stepped into the kitchen. Time seemed to slow down, each second stretching into an eternity as I watched his expression shift. At first, it was casual, just the easy, relaxed look he always wore after a long talk with his dad. His mouth slightly curved, his eyes warm. But then, as he took in the scene before him, that warmth vanished. His gaze moved from me, disheveled and visibly shaken, to Miles and Grant, who stood unnaturally still on either side of the room. Confusion flickered across his face, his brow furrowing as he tried to piece together what he was seeing. And then, in a heartbeat, that confusion morphed into something else, something raw and broken. His eyes, those kind, steady eyes I'd always relied on to ground me, darkened with a pain so deep it stole the air from the room. He didn't say anything at first. He just stared, his silence louder than any shout could ever be. I felt it like a physical weight, pressing down on me, crushing me under the enormity of what I'd done. His gaze lingered on me, taking in every detail. My flushed face, my trembling hands, the way I couldn't meet his eyes for more than a split second before looking away. Then his attention shifted to his brothers, and I saw the betrayal cut even deeper, a wound that went beyond just me and him. It was in the way his shoulders slumped slightly, the way his hands hung loose at his sides, like he didn't know what to do with them. The air in the kitchen was thick, suffocating, charged with an unspoken truth that none of us could deny. I wanted to speak, to say something, anything, to fill that awful silence. But my throat was tight. My words trapped behind a wall of shame and fear. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 screams. "You're not mine anymore." Those words sliced through me, sharper and more painful than I could have ever imagined. They weren't angry, weren't filled with rage or accusation. They were just broken, resigned, like he'd already accepted the truth before he even finished speaking. I stood there, frozen, as Dylan turned away, his footsteps heavy as he left the kitchen without another word. The silence that followed was deafening, a void that swallowed every sound, every thought, every shred of hope I might have clung to. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as the weight of his words settled into my bones. Miles and Grant didn't look at me, didn't speak. They just muttered something under their breath, excuses maybe, or apologies that didn't matter, and slipped out of the room, their presence fading like smoke. I was alone now, standing in the middle of that kitchen, the scene of my betrayal, with nothing but the faint drip of the still-running faucet to keep me company. My hands gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles white, as I tried to steady myself against the storm raging inside me. From the living room, I heard Linda's voice, soft and concerned, cutting through the haze. "Carmen, honey, what's wrong? I heard Dylan leave. Everything okay?" Her tone was so gentle, so full of that maternal warmth I'd come to rely on, that it nearly broke me right then and there. I couldn't face her. I couldn't look into her eyes and pretend everything was fine. Couldn't bear the thought of her seeing the truth written all over my face. My chest tightened, a sob threatening to escape. But I swallowed it down. Without a word, I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, the fabric rough against my trembling fingers, and bolted out of the house. The cool night air hit me like a slap, sharp and biting, as I stumbled down the porch steps and made for the car. I didn't look back, didn't dare to see if Linda was watching from the window. I just needed to get away, to escape the suffocating weight of that house and everything it now represented. The drive home was a blur, a disjointed mess of streetlights and shadowy roads that I barely registered. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my fingers ached, my mind replaying Dylan's words over and over, each repetition cutting deeper. "You're not mine anymore." I could still see the pain in his eyes, the way his entire being seemed to collapse in on itself as he realized what had happened. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away, refusing to let them fall. I didn't deserve to cry, didn't deserve the release of it. This was my fault, my choice, my betrayal. The guilt gnawed at me, a living thing that clawed at my insides, leaving nothing but raw, aching emptiness in its wake. When I pulled into the parking lot of our apartment building, the familiar sight of the brick facade and flickering street lamp did nothing to comfort me. I sat in the car for a moment, the engine off, the silence pressing in around me. I didn't want to go inside, didn't want to face the life we'd built together now that it was shattered. But I had nowhere else to go. So, with legs that felt like lead, I climbed the stairs to our unit, each step heavier than the last. The key turned in the lock with a hollow click, and the door creaked open to reveal an apartment that felt like a stranger's home. The lights were off, the air stale, and there, in the dim glow filtering through the window, I saw it. Dylan's things, half-packed in boxes and bags scattered across the living room floor. It was as if he'd known this day would come, as if he'd been preparing to leave me long before tonight's disaster. The sight hit me like a punch to the gut, stealing what little breath I had left. I wandered through the space, my footsteps echoing in the quiet, until I reached the kitchen counter. There, sitting abandoned, was Dylan's phone. My heart stuttered as I picked it up, the screen cold under my fingers. I don't know what I was hoping for, some message, some sign that he hadn't completely given up on me. But when I unlocked it, I found nothing. Our shared photos, the ones we'd taken on lazy Sundays or during road months, have passed since that night. But the weight of it still sits on my chest like a stone I can't push off. I'm Carmen, and I'm still here, though here isn't the same anymore. I moved out of the apartment Dylan and I shared, couldn't bear the echoes of our life together, lingering in every corner. Now, I'm in a new place, a small, sterile one-bedroom on the other side of town, far from the familiar streets and the house with the sagging porch. The walls are bare, the furniture minimal, just a bed, a couch, a table I rarely use. There's no warmth here, no trace of the life I once knew, and I don't try to create it. It feels fitting, somehow, to live in a space as empty as I feel inside. The silence is my constant companion now, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator or the distant sound of traffic outside my window. It's a far cry from the laughter and chaos of family dinners, from the steady comfort of Dylan's presence beside me. I haven't heard from Dylan since he walked out of that kitchen. Not a call, not a text, not even a fleeting glimpse of him in town. I've tried reaching out, left voicemails that go unanswered, sent messages that sit unread. His silence is a wall I can't climb over, a punishment I know I deserve. I keep imagining what he's doing, where he's gone, if he's found a way to heal from the wound I inflicted. Sometimes I picture him with someone new, someone who won't shatter his trust the way I did, and that thought cuts deeper than I can say. His family, too, has slowly faded from my life. Linda's calls tapered off after the first few weeks, her voice growing colder each time, laced with a disappointment she didn't bother to hide. Robert stopped asking me to come by for coffee. Even the casual texts from other relatives, the ones who used to check in just to say hi, have dried up. I can't blame them. When they look at me, I know they see the pain I caused, the betrayal that tore through their tight-knit world like a jagged blade. I'm a reminder of something they'd rather forget, and so they've let me go, piece by piece, until I'm nothing more than a ghost on the edges of their lives. Sitting here now, in the dim light of my new apartment, I find myself turning over the pieces of that night again and again, trying to understand how I let it happen. I've had to face some hard truths about myself in these long, quiet months. I don't regret the act itself, as twisted as that sounds. That moment with Miles and Grant, that reckless, fleeting abandon. It was a mirror held up to a part of me I'd buried deep, a part I didn't want to acknowledge. It was a truth I needed to confront, a raw, unfiltered glimpse into desires I'd ignored for too long. I can't pretend it didn't happen, can't pretend I didn't feel something in that chaos, even if it was wrong. But what I do regret, what keeps me awake at night, is the destruction it unleashed. I shattered something real, something beautiful, something I didn't even realize I cherished until it was gone. Dylan wasn't just my husband. He was my anchor, my home in a world where I'd never had one before, and in a single selfish moment, I threw it all away. The irony isn't lost on me. By giving in to that forbidden pull, by betraying him, I lost the very thing I valued most, a sense of belonging. I'd spent my whole life searching for a place to call mine, and when I finally found it, I burned it to the ground. I've tried to move forward, to fill the void with something, anything, but nothing sticks. I go to work, come home, eat meals alone at my tiny table, staring at the empty chair across from me. I've stopped going to the places we used to frequent, the diner where we'd grab breakfast on weekends, the park where we'd walk after dinner. Those spots are haunted now, but today, as I pass by the park, I decide to sit on our favorite bench, allowing the memories to wash over me like a gentle tide, and for the first time, I feel a sense of peace. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.